Hello and welcome, dear viewers. As an American, I think I can say with confidence that there are certain things my country does well when it comes to cars. Chief among them, and the one we're probably best known for, is SUVs. As a result, I feel fully prepared to review this, the Hao Yue SUV, and tell you whether it lives up to my lofty standards as an SUV-loving American.
The Hao Yue is a 7-seat SUV, and the largest one offered by Chinese manufacturer Geely. Yes, it's pronounced Geely, not Geely. Geely has been making waves in the automotive world for almost a decade, with the purchase of Volvo, Proton, and Lotus, and the creation of the Lynk & Co. brand. Geely will soon begin exporting a version of the Hao Yue to the Philippines, where it will be called the Okavango.
The exterior styling on the Hao Yue is pretty traditional SUV. That means broad shoulders and beefy presence. Here on the front end, we have the latest version of Geely's signature Cosmic Recall grille design, and I think it's the most handsome version yet. It looks as though the Geely badge was dropped into a pool of water, and these pieces here represent the ripples that ensued. I also like the little LED here. It's a kind of L shape. The headlights themselves also do a neat little party trick whenever you unlock the car.
The sheer size of the Hao Yue becomes apparent when it is viewed in profile. It might not stack up to the size of SUVs like America's Chevy Suburban, but it's plenty big for most roads. The proportions of the body are good, and it avoids the boring slab sides of many SUVs. But I must say that I wish the 18-inch wheels were a bit larger. I understand the benefits of these wheels in terms of ride comfort and price, but I think the overall look would benefit from 19 or even 20-inch alloys. Maybe a set of beefy off-road tires would balance the look a bit.
The rear design of the Hao Yue is simple but not simplistic. The rear taillight design is distinctive, especially when lit, and I like this aluminum look piece that connects the two. Now, Geely is pretty lucky in that their English name doesn't sound quite so strange to non-Chinese speakers' ears, especially compared to some other Chinese brands. This is a not insignificant benefit when it comes time for export. If we open up the electric tailgate on the Hao Yue, you begin to see its real forte, and that is space. Lots and lots of space. If you lay down the second and third rows, you get 2,050 liters of space, plus underfloor storage compartments. Geely will even give you a custom air mattress that fits snugly inside. You can always put your cargo on the roof rails while you sleep soundly indoors. Here inside, touches like the big grab handles front and rear are intended to give you a sense of rugged capability, and I think that overall it succeeds. One of the things I really like about Geely models is the material quality and the fit and finish. Now, this applies to the Geely Jiaji that we drove earlier this year, and it also applies to the Hao Yue. Now, don't get me wrong. This is a car that goes for between $15,000 and $21,000, so all the materials are not real aluminum and reclaimed wood, but it's pretty hard to find anything that's genuinely unpleasant to touch. For example, the materials here on the dashboard are soft touch and the kind of thing that you would expect to see in much more expensive cars. Now, the only thing that reminds you of the more affordable price point is perhaps the silver elements here on the dashboard. We are in the top-of-the-line trim, which means that we have two 12.3-inch LCD screens. These screens are well integrated with a very functional UI and quick responses. The other thing I want to highlight about the interior is the 360-degree camera on the Hao Yue. Now, this is becoming more and more of a standard feature as cars get larger and harder to see out of. So what I judge them based on is how much they distort your surroundings when you use them. In this respect, the Hao Yue is actually pretty good, as opposed to some other systems, especially older ones, that make everything around you look like a Picasso painting. It makes driving an SUV this large in a city like Shanghai a much more manageable prospect. As a nature lover, I'm very excited by this giant 1.5-meter sunroof. Now, most sunroofs this large don't actually open, but the one in the Hao Yue does. That means even backseat passengers can enjoy a little bit of sun. Speaking of backseat passengers, they have it pretty good. Seems like the Geely Hao Yue was designed with families in mind from the very start. Space back here is copious, and while it may look like a traditional bench seat, each of these 3 seats is independently adjustable. Second and third row passengers also have their own climate zone, and second-row passengers have their own climate controls. Now, as a grown adult, I don't relish the idea of sitting in the third row of really any vehicle, but as someone that grew up in the back seat of a minivan, I have to say that I think you can do worse than the third row of the Hao Yue. It helps that it has its own separate air vents and adjustable backrests. These are both things I desperately could have used during those long road trips of my youth.
The Hao Yue's powertrain diverges from the American tradition of V8s with a more practical 1.8-liter Turbo 4 connected to a 7-speed DCT. That engine puts out 184 horsepower and an impressive 300 Nm of torque. The Hao Yue is front-wheel drive only, and despite its hill descent control, it makes no pretense about its off-roading skills. Geely doesn't offer an official 0 to 100 km/h time either, which, well, it makes sense. This is an affordable family SUV, so 0 to 100 times aren't really the point. The version that's headed to the Philippines will feature a 48-volt mild hybrid system called Electric Motor Synergy. That means a gas engine and an electric motor, so expect similar thrust and more fuel efficiency.
Despite my addiction to V8 engines, sitting in the driver's seat of the Hao Yue, I have to say that it doesn't really feel like it wants for power. That 300 Nm of torque comes on quick, and you can actually chirp the tires from a full stop with a full throttle launch, even with ESP on. Now, most SUV buyers aren't going to be doing full throttle launches, but thankfully the Hao Yue can also offer smooth power delivery. In fact, the engine and transmission both seem to be tuned more for comfort, with smooth shifts and easy throttle modulation. Geely is widely considered to offer some of the best DCT transmissions of any Chinese manufacturer, so that's not particularly surprising.
The Hao Yue has McPherson struts up front and a torsion beam suspension in the rear. Yeah, a non-independent rear suspension is a bit old school, but my gut tells me they chose it for its tidy dimensions. An independent rear suspension would have taken up more space, and hence eaten up more space inside the cabin.
If you like light steering, boy is the Hao Yue the car for you. It makes low-speed maneuvering completely effortless. Of course, the trade-off is that the Hao Yue doesn't have the same vault-like driving experience of, say, a German SUV. Having said that, it's also a quarter of the price of a similarly sized German SUV. The suspension, much like the engine and transmission, is definitely tuned more for comfort and will filter out even the most disastrous potholes and speed bumps. Overall, it essentially drives kind of like a Geely Jiaji on stilts, which, in this context, and trust me on this, is actually a good thing. Now, I love the idea of clambering down an off-road trail in a highly capable SUV just as much as the next enthusiast. But the reality is that for most buyers, an SUV should be practical above all else. That means being able to carry a lot of people and stuff in comfort. In terms of space per dollar spent, the Hao Yue is a pretty impressive feat of engineering. So if you're not one of those people that gets really hung up on the idea of imaginary off-road adventures, the Hao Yue will probably suit your needs just fine. If you're watching from the Philippines, you can look forward to seeing your version of the Hao Yue, called the Okavango, later this month. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.